So here we go. Okay, so I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the land that eBOUND Canada operates on is in the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Okay, and that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Okay, so I'm calling it Audiobook Boot Camp because it really does feel that way. There's so many things to consider with audiobooks and that are just a little bit different from ebooks and kind of more straightforward web PDFs and things like that. So we really want to try and get things into fighting shape. So I think most of you know who I am. So I'm Emma. I'm the technology specialist here at eBOUND. And I cover everything from, I'm just going to move this guy up here. I handle everything metadata, distribution, core source. I'm also one of our Benetech certifiers. So I work with publishers to certify their workflows, and then I help with the spot checks, and I do all of our small batch conversions as well. So not the bigger projects, but the smaller ones, making EPUBs fully accessible and getting them converted from the print version into the EPUB version. So if ever you're wondering who to email about any of those things, it's me, and that's my email right there. Okay. So one of the big things is kind of understanding how audiobooks differ from ebooks. And there's kind of a few main things. So there's more metadata, meaning there's chapter metadata and some audiobook length and file information metadata. More files themselves, because each individual chapter needs to be a separate MP3 file. And I guess I gotta keep an eye here on if anyone needs to come in. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so more files because they're each individual MP3 files, and longer processing times because excuse me, because the files need to go through a QA process, which are often different at all the vendors. But more fun, maybe, if you want to look at it that way. More ways for things to go wrong. But also audiobooks are one of my preferred reading methods. I get all my audiobooks off of Scribd, and I read probably like 8 audiobooks a month, I would say. So they're really a wonderful and almost inherently more accessible without having to add a bunch of additional features in the back end. So yeah, that's my pitch. Okay, so I'm gonna go over a few different files that are either necessary or just helpful in today's presentation, and then I'm going to follow up and send them to everyone in a separate email so you have it as well. I would recommend you save all of these files to your desktop, because otherwise they get buried, and just have them very specifically on the desktop, because you have to get in the habit of referring back to things like the metadata spreadsheet, which is, if you're using the spreadsheet, I know some of you do create Onyx in your metadata that is in an Onyx provider. But for anyone that's using the spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets are a good way to kind of teach yourself about what is absolutely vital that you need to add even in your Onyx provider. So I've created a metadata spreadsheet with all of the columns highlighted that you absolutely need, because it does get kind of missed sometimes. And I've also put in some samples there. And then the chapter metadata is a separate additional thing that's needed for all audiobooks as well, which communicates the chapter titles, so that anything that's created from a vendor like on Audible or Scribd, you get an actual table of contents with detailed information. So that's where that comes from in the chapter metadata. I'm going to send you the Audible specs again. And someone, I'm not sure if Gavin's here, but he did point out the other day that the Audible specs look incomplete, that some of the pages are missing. That's by design. I took out the back half because it doesn't apply to anyone, because the back half was about distribution and they're talking about distributing directly to them, and you distribute if you're going to Audible via eBOUND, you distribute via CoreSource. So all of their distribution information was confusing. And I've also created, which we'll go over, a new checklist. So it's all sectioned out and tells you who to send each piece of information to, and allows you to kind of check things off and assign it to people. So I'll send you that as well. Okay, so the goals for today, I just want to review the specs so that we're all on the same page about what you absolutely need and what you don't absolutely need. A little bit of background as well. When we were distributing to Find a Way, they were distributing for us to Audible previously. What happened there was, since their merger, we haven't really been able to get much of a response from them, and we also have been having issues with their ingestion. So when they went through that merger, they changed their processes, and essentially what happened was they didn't automate anything for eBOUND's accounts because things were coming in such a kind of different way. And the reason for that is because all of our publishers use different audio engineers. So things are coming in with different, what we'll go over in a sec, different bit rates, different variable bit rates and things like that, instead of what they wanted and how they could set it up. So as a result of that, we decided, okay, well, let's try and go through to Audible directly, which we'd always had an issue doing. And now we were able to actually get a contract with them. So that was a huge win, because now, thanks to that contract, I actually get specific info from Audible whenever we send something to them. Whereas in the past, when it was going through Find a Way, we would just get a report back that said audio issues. It wouldn't tell you which file or where or what the audio issue was. And so there was no real way to fix it because you didn't know what you were looking for. So now we know what the issues are, but we are getting a lot of them and seeing a lot of issues. So that's what today is about. We'll go over the distribution process as well, in case that's unclear to anyone. And then we'll go over the checklist that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so why is this so hard? Why are audiobooks so finicky? Well, in a word, it's Audible. They're very, very specific about what they will and won't allow on the site, which is good because it adds a layer of protection to make sure that the files are up to par, but it does kind of create a lot of issues. And then the other big issue is that there's a disconnect sometimes between whoever the publishers have hired to create their audio files. So the audio engineers and the vendors, right? Because the audio engineers, they create the files to their own internal specifications, and there isn't always a direct relationship with the vendors and what they allow. For example, I recently was trying to work with someone to get their titles up, and I noticed that the audio engineer hadn't split the chapters up into individual chapters. He had them in parts, but not in individual chapters. So that meant that there's say 4 parts. Each part was, I think it was like 200 minutes or something like that. And that's way too long of a file. It won't be accepted by any of the audio vendors. So we'll go over that again. So that's an example of the audio engineer just not knowing, right? And putting things in parts instead of breaking it down into chapters. So my hopes and dreams for the webinar anyway, not for my whole life, is that you learn how to QA your files before you distribute them. My mouse is haunted. And you understand what vendors want, and we get your books up in the 2 to 3 weeks it should take. So it should be 2 to 3 weeks from you distributing it, maybe even you creating the metadata and getting it into CoreSource, and then it processing on Audible. That really should be the exact length of time, which again is a huge improvement from what Find a Way was previously saying, which was 3 to 4 months. Okay, so we're going to start with covers. And are there any questions or anything right now? Feel free to put your hand up if there are. I think we're okay. Okay. My mouse is really haunted. Okay, so we're gonna start with covers. This is a big one that comes up a lot, that people don't have their covers either in CoreSource or that they're not distributing to the vendor properly. So two things here once we go over what the cover should look like. So they should be 24 by 2400 pixels. So they're square, they're perfectly square. And that's because, you know, if you look on Kobo's website, well, any digital book vendor, the audio covers are always square and the EPUB covers are always rectangular. Okay. They have to be RGB, not CMYK. That's across all digital books, but we do see them come back sometimes as CMYK. And that's just because your designer exported it, or somebody along the line exported it as CMYK and not RGB. So that's a simple fix, but it's a difficult one to catch, you know, at the right time. And ideally, we just want all these files in CoreSource correctly and then going out correctly, right? And then 72 DPI, that will mean that it's the right size as well. If it's 72 DPI and 24 by 24. Okay, so that's the big thing there. And we also want to make sure, so I'm just using hello. I'm just using one of Latitude. Oh my goodness. Okay, hang on here. One of Latitude 46's titles. I know that they would not mind as an example. So I just want to jump into CoreSource here for a second. Okay. So I'm just looking at one of their audiobooks here, and I'm going to go back into their title group. So this is what we want to see for an audiobook. So right here, these last two, they've got the audiobook ISBN, and then we've got digital audio, MP3, and multiple files here. And then we've also got a specific front cover audio. Okay, and that just means that the channels need to be, all the audio channels need to be set up to receive front cover audio, and that you're ingesting it with the right file name. So the audio ISBN fcaudio.jpg. Okay, and one other thing to just double check, if you ever notice that that the front cover isn't going out when you do a distribution, because again, it has to have the same ISBN. Some places it doesn't matter. I think Overdrive is supposed to have the same ISBN as well. There's some vendors that they don't mind if it doesn't have the same ISBN, but for Kobo, it absolutely has to. For Overdrive, it absolutely has to. So essentially what we end up doing is we need to aim for whoever has the strictest audio regulations and make sure we're meeting them, and then we'll meet the other ones kind of below them. So one thing I'm just going to show you here, if we go under manage and distribution channels, I'm just going to look at Kobo audio here, and I'm clicking on the asset type rules. And so if I look in here right now, it's not set up to send that cover. So I need to make sure that it is. So front cover audio, I'm going to triggers auto distribution, and I'm going to move that to the top. So it's kind of a weird process, but I'm just clicking up, 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 up. And essentially CoreSource is a hierarchy, right? So it's going to grab whatever's at the top. So it's now going to grab that front cover audio. It's .jpg, but it could be .jpeg with the E or PNG. And it's going to send that one with the same audio ISBN. These are selected as on, but they don't need to be because we're only doing MP3s now. It used to be that certain vendors accepted WAV files and certain vendors accepted MP3, but all vendors prefer MP3 now. So that is, well, all the ones we work with anyway. So that's the general understanding there. Okay. Keep going here. Okay. So when we're talking about the files, okay, so well, those came in a nice, interesting order. Okay, so digital audio MP3, not WAV, as we just said. Okay, so these are the ones that start to get a little bit confusing. So by a nod of a couple heads, are we familiar at this point with bit rate and constant bit rate and all of these things, or not really? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to show you what it looks like once it's in CoreSource, because that's how I check things. Again, when we go over the checklist, all of this stuff should be communicated to your audio engineer, and you'll just kind of have a better understanding of it so that you know what to look for to see if something's kind of up. So I'm going to, again, go out of here and I'm going to show you what this looks like in CoreSource. Okay. So again, I'm in this one title here. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm lying to you. I'm in a channel still. Okay. So I'm just going to go into their titles here. Oop. And this is a title that I recently worked on, uploading for them. So I have a pretty thorough understanding of these particular files. This lovely book. Okay, so when it's uploaded into CoreSource, it looks like this. Okay, and I've clicked on into the ISBN, into the metadata, and clicked on files. And each file should come in like this. We're going to go over in a little bit, renaming them. And they come in like this. So the first thing I would do is I would check to make sure that all of the numbers are in order, right? And if there's anything off, like we've got an extra, like sometimes I've forgotten the period here, and then so it ends up being called mp3 and that will throw it off. And this is vital. If you write anything down today, know that everything has to be in order. So if I screw up the naming of this file, I'm going to have to then delete all of these files, file 2 all the way down to 21, delete them, and then rename the file and re-upload everything. Unfortunately, that's how CoreSource works. Everything needs to be in order. So you can't just say, oops, I messed up file number 2, delete it, and then upload it again, because it will then send the files out of order. Yeah, I wish I had control over that, but oh, sidebar. Do you all know about the feedback tool? Maybe this is a good time to mention it. In CoreSource, if you click on the question mark and then you click on, so I'm just in my CoreSource account here, click on question mark and then feedback, you can actually give feedback that seems to, it's almost like Reddit, and you can upvote different things. So that seems to be something they're leaning on a little bit now. And if you ever have something that really doesn't make sense, you need to submit an idea, you can do it there. So if that's one of the things where you would like for them to allow you to delete one file and then delete it, and then re-upload it not in order, that could be something you could add there. Okay, so once you've got all your files in and they're named correctly and there's no issues, so usually what I'll do is I'll kind of scroll down and make sure my eyes aren't catching anything odd or out of place. Then I'll actually go through and I'll check the bit rate and the channel layout. Okay, so these are the two that I see the issue with the most often. So the bit rate needs to be 192 or higher. Okay, so this is fine. And then the channel layout for each file needs to be the same. So mono, I don't really know enough about audio to describe what mono is. Stereo is, and generally files are in mono. I don't, and maybe somebody else knows what that means and they can jump in, but essentially stereo is used for if there's sound effects or music or like additional things coming, if it's not just, you know, voice. So for the most part, I see mono. And what happens is sometimes files come in from different places, and that's when you'll end up seeing mono and stereo mixed. So I will literally go through and I will check 320 mono. Good. 320 mono. So I'm just clicking view attributes, 320 mono. Okay, for all of them. I'm not going to make you watch me do that because that's horrible. But that's what I do. I know these files are all good to go. Okay, so that's a big issue that comes back a lot, is that the bit rate is incorrect. And that again is an easy fix. Okay, that's again much like the RGB versus CMYK with the covers. It's just an export thing. Okay, so if there is an issue and that comes up, I can fix it, or I can teach you how to fix it. But yeah, it's pretty easy to do. Okay. Okay, so that's everything for that. Any questions or anything so far? Are we still doing okay? Would I see questions if... Hang on, do I need to do this? Okay. All right, I don't actually run webinars very often, so or use Zoom. We always use Google Meets, so I'm a little bit lost at times, but I don't think anyone has any questions, so we're good. Okay. Now for metadata, I'm going to go over the spreadsheets with you, and anyone that uses Onyx to create their metadata, just know that you can transfer it to Onyx, anything that I'm saying. If you have issues, okay, good. It does show me. Excellent. Okay. Yes, Maya, that is the case, unfortunately. So Maya's asking, if we want to replace a single file, do we have to re-upload all the files? So you have to re-upload any files after the file you want it replace. So including the file. So if you have 30 files and file 15 has an issue and you want to fix file 15, you need to delete files 15 to 30, fix file 15, and then upload files 15 to 30 all at the same time. Okay, and I'm going to go over how to do that as well in a second in case there's any issues. When retailers report back that they've found issues in QA, how do the publishers know? Yeah, so you will get an email from me regarding anything with audio. Kobo sends reports, Overdrive sends reports, Audible sends emails, and DeMarc doesn't really send anything, but I have backend access and a lot of visibility there so that I can then see what's going on. So anything, any issue that's reported to me, I always forward it on to the publisher. Okay, move that over there. Okay, so for the metadata, a big one that we often see people forget is the narrator. Okay, you have to have a narrator for audiobooks, and it can't be words by or read by or anything fun. It has to be narrator. Okay. And I'm going to show you the metadata spreadsheet again. Chapter titles. In the past, I was just putting chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. But if there are actual chapter titles, you know, beyond chapter 1, like chapter 1, the beginning or whatever, you want to add the words the beginning to the chapter metadata. And duration is important as well. That's got to be sent to Audible manually. And I'm going to show you where that goes in the spreadsheet as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you the spreadsheet right now. Okay, so as I said, there's two. So we're going to start with the spreadsheet that we use for just regular. Okay, let me make this bigger. Move this guy down. And zoom in a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to start teaching this in a way I've never actually taught it before with the pricing, because I almost feel like that's going to make it make more sense. So I know it's this big giant spreadsheet, but most people have some experience with it at this point. And But this is always the part that trips people up. And I think if maybe I start here, it'll make more sense. So when you're doing metadata, each line in the spreadsheet is a price. Okay, so that's the way to think of it. So for one title, I have 4 prices here. Okay, so I've highlighted in yellow anywhere that you need to add the information. So like it's a must add. And for audiobooks, I don't believe anywhere that we distribute anyway requires agency. Agency is a price type that's, in my understanding, just used for Apple and just for eBooks. I have yet to see someone request agency, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that. If somebody else knows a vendor that requires agency for audiobooks. For us anyway, the retail price gets sent to DeMarc and that goes to Apple from there. So the agency price isn't required. So these are like the bare minimum prices. Canadian and US, those are our main markets. So those are the ones, if you're trying to get something out quick, those are the ones to hit. And for those markets, the O1 price type and then library retail. You can also, so any other additional currency you want to add is an additional line, right? So if I wanted to add retail euro, retail GBP, that would be another line. And then same with library euro, library GBP. Okay. And for pricing, we always just say eBOUND doesn't set the pricing for anyone. We always just say to look at the market, look at comparable titles and price them close to those. Okay. So I'm just to simplify, I'm going to take that out of the equation for now. So we've got 4 lines of data here. Okay. One for library, Canadian, US, retail, Canadian, US. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And then all of the yellow again are ones that you need. So it would look like, this is how I do it. I do the first line. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I do the first line. And again, we need the information repeated. So it's just, that's the only difference is that pricing, that currency and the price. Everything else is just repeating the information. So the title group ID in Onyx, it's your work ID or your work reference. The reason we say the print ISBN is because that's going to attach it in core source to your other versions of that book. Okay, and then same here, audiobook ISBN. You're just copying all of these things down. Okay, I don't think I need to go through each and do this with you. A nice way to, if you're doing multiple books at a time, I'll just add this line at the bottom, and then that makes me know, okay, I can just copy down to that line. Okay, that's just a little trick that I use. Okay, so these are all the things that you need. A reminder that even if you don't have an imprint, so even if House of Anansi is uploading for House of Anansi, it has to say House of Anansi twice. Okay. Again, that's just a core source thing. For audio, we use AA Audio, A103 MP3 format for product form detail. Okay. And then again, here's contributor 1 is always author. Okay, they're the person that gets the biggest credit. And then contributor 2 is your voice actor, so your narrator, okay? And they have to be in there again. And again, each of these highlighted ones we're copying down, okay? The reason I do suggest that you use so if I was the narrator, and then also putting it in reversed, and then just my first name, and then just my last name, because some vendors pull from this info and not from this full name info. And so you want to have as many combinations as you can, because that also helps if people they're like, who wrote that book again? And they can only remember Cote. Okay. Your bios are not like, that's not required, but these are all things that we highly recommend. And I wouldn't go over, 250 words is still kind of a lot. I would probably keep it a little bit under that. Okay, so then again, you've got your prices and your sales rights. So these are the most common we see for our small publishers, the unrestricted world rights. Okay. And then your pub date, I just decided this fake book was coming out on Halloween. Okay, and then this is the audiobook length in minutes is something that comes up a lot because people tend to put the wrong number in here. So I just want to show you quickly a little trick that I use for getting all of the full length. So I've got my raw files here. So the audio engineer just sent me these. I'm going to copy them and I'm going to open with VLC. So VLC, most people have that. And when I open with VLC,
Chapter 8.
just going to pause that. It's going to give me the total time here. Okay. So 7 hours, 13 minutes, 41 seconds. So that means I need to do, so 7 times 60 plus 13.41. So 7 times 60 plus 13.41. Okay, so that's 413.41. Okay. And then that number would go right in here. Okay. This is not the same sample, but we'll just, my sampling's all over the place, but okay, we'll just say that that was the right one. Okay. And you can leave this blank because the bitrate is automatically pulled in now. Again, this is very important. If there's no language, it's going to get rejected. Some retailers require BISACs. So I just grabbed the first one, which was like something related to antique toys. So we're coming out with a book about antique haunted toys on Halloween or something, I guess. And in case I just wrote a little note here, in case you're struggling for BISACs, they're all actually in this spreadsheet. So if you click on subject codes down here, you can search in here and grab them. A note on the BISACs, if you do add a juvenile BISAC, you are going to have to add an age range, okay? But that's only if you add a juvenile BISAC because they need to know that it's appropriate for audiences. Okay, this column is where you would add keywords if you want to. And again, we should be copying this down for each one. And so I grabbed a BISAC for haunted toys. So antique haunted animals, toys, whatever words are the best. And a note on keywords to, note on the BISACs to whatever one you put first will be considered your main BISAC automatically. Okay. And then your main description, that's the one you must have. We always recommend adding these if you can, if you have a real short one. Not a lot of vendors make use of the long description, but some do with the short description. But we always say the more metadata, the better, right? Copyright details, some are, at one point Hoopla was requiring this, but I don't know if that was just an error. So usually it's the author's name for our independent publishers, or maybe the publisher holds the copyright. So just whoever that should be. And again, so general trade, if it's for an adult audience, and if you have a BISAC for juvenile, then you might need to change this around to young adult, children, juvenile, okay? And if that is the case, then you also want to add the audience range, okay? And then I think there's this is important as well. So this is what links your Audible book to your print book to your ebook. Okay, so don't ever skimp on this. You can I usually just put it in like this and then they link together automatically. But so I've got the code 13 e-publication based on print, and then the ISBN, and then the print ISBN. And then to include your ebook as well, you can use 06 alternative format, and then the ISBN again, and then the EPUB ISBN. Okay. And then that's it. That is it. Okay, so those are the things that can cause issues. I'm going to save that little, and I'm going to send you guys this that we went through. Okay, and then the other metadata is the chapter metadata. Okay, let me just look at the okay, maybe I'll read those after, unless there's, yeah, I'll read through those in a sec there. Okay. And then the chapter metadata. Okay, so again, this is necessary for anyone using the spreadsheets. For Onyx, I'm not actually sure. It must be that you added in another section. Maybe somebody can tell me that uses an Onyx provider, where the chapter metadata is added, or if it's just via a TOC input file. So maybe you can help each other there for if anyone uses an Onyx provider and isn't entirely sure if they're including this. One way to confirm that you're including it is to come into the composition tab in the in CoreSource, and we'll see it here. So I actually need to update these ones because these ones have, which I thought I did actually, but these ones have chapter titles. So you would see it here. Chapter title, I think chapter 1. Oh, wait, hang on a second. No, it's a different book. If Heather, I don't know if Heather's in here right now. She's probably laughing at. That's okay. I'm just going to show you another book that I believe the chapter titles are in. So again, I'm just going into the metadata right in CoreSource, clicking on composition. Yeah, here we go. Oh no, this one doesn't have it either. Okay, well, I will have to take a look at that after because this one I believe has additional chapter titles. Okay, so that's where it would show up. Okay, and back to this guy. This always stays at 0. I don't know why. I don't totally know what it's for, but it just always stays at 0. And then this is helping you, this is helping CoreSource put the files in order. So they have to be in the same order that they would be in the book, right? In the TOC. And then again, so this is the print ISBN, because this is helping associate it with that title group in CoreSource. And then this is the audiobook ISBN. And we're always doing digital audio MP3. Okay. So uploading and ingesting. So first you want to upload the metadata and chapter spreadsheets, because that is going to, if it doesn't already exist, that's going to create the title group, okay? And then you want to do the files. And again, the files are tricky because I'm just going to show you. The files are tricky because they have to be renamed. And if someone, so this is my fake example about haunted toys, which sounds kind of fun if someone wants to write that book. If someone has a hack for doing this that I don't know, please feel free to let me know. So this is kind of an example of what the files might come back from your audio engineer looking like. And then they all need to be renamed. So the best way that I've found to do that is to just do it one at a time and then add in, if you need to add in the suffix afterwards, prefix, suffix, yeah, the suffix afterwards. And so what I'll usually do is, okay, I see intro dedications and then chapter 2 and looks like 18. Is there 19? Yes. Is there 20? Okay, so 19 is the last chapter. If anyone has a better way of doing that, you can let me know. So then what I'll start to do is I'll go chapter 1 and then I'll rename it like this. And then it puts them in the right order, at least. And you've got all the numbers there. Okay. So then what I'll do is I'll select all, rename. Okay. And so after haunted toys, I'm going to go, replace haunted toys with this. Okay. Okay. So now we've got it closer to what it needs to be. Oh, hang on. I shouldn't have left an S there. So haunted toys, I accidentally left an S there. So rename. And then once the numbers are there, then you can rename them again. So you're replacing the 0 with 001. Nope, that didn't work. Okay, so essentially you're needing to rename them so that it's 001 and then 002. So before I do that for all of them, whoops, I'm just going to go back one here. So before I do that for all of them, I would then change each individual one to a number. Okay. And this is why it can get so, whoops, not 1. Sorry, that should be 2. 2. Okay. And this is why it can get so confusing, because you have to make sure that you're renaming them in the right order and that you're also adding the proper suffix. So once they've all got the right number, because that's the biggest thing, is making sure that they're staying in the right order and that they all are numbered 001, 002. Okay. And then you can, at the end, add in, so add text. And once they have the 001, then you would add in before name, after name, underscore. It doesn't actually need to be capitalized, underscore MP3. So it's showing you here. So we'd have to get rid of the haunted toys and we'd have to save 001 underscore MP3. Okay, so I'll just show you what the first one would look like, fully properly renamed. So 1 underscore 001 underscore mp3.mp3. Okay, so that's the naming, the file naming that needs to happen. And again, I've got a checklist that will hopefully make everyone be like, okay, that's better at the end here. So this is one of the hardest things, is renaming the files so that they all match. So again, I would just get rid of all the haunted toys after I've named them all, and then add the underscore MP3 at the end. I know that's a bit confusing, but I will just quickly jump over to CoreSource here again to show you. So this is what they would look like when they've come in. So 001 underscore MP3 all the way down to the last one. 610069. Okay, yeah, that looked a bit odd, but it's good. Okay, any questions on that right now, or is that sort of making sense? We're almost there, and I will take any additional questions. Okay, so once you've got your files correctly named and you've got your cover in, then what you want to do is just double check that the bit rates came in correctly, because sometimes there can be an upload issue and you can end up with a file that's like way too short, that it just didn't transfer properly. That would be kind of overkill, I think, to look at the duration, because it's in milliseconds when it comes in. So essentially, you're just making sure that all of the files, you can kind of, before you upload them, listen to them, not in full, but just the beginning and end of them, and make sure that there's no, because they will reject audio if there's any long pauses at the beginning or end of files. Like I said, they're just very persnickety. So for distribution, it's the same as distributing for eBooks. So Audible Direct, if you have it via eBOUND, DeMarc Audio goes, and these are all separate channels, right? So DeMarc Audio goes to Apple and Google Play. Audible Direct is now via eBOUND. find a way. We still distribute through them for Scribd audio, not for the eBooks. They're separate, unfortunately, but we are trying to work with DeMarc to get Scribd audio up through them as well, because again, there's just so much access to the information there. And then other separate audio channels are Kobo, Overdrive, Zebralution. So if you don't have any of those channels and you do have audiobooks, please do reach out to Paula _Bruce at eBOUNDcanada.org, because she will set you up with the contracts, and then I would open those channels for you if you need them. Okay, and for Audible, again, this is extra annoying, but you can't forget this step. We only started needing this info and to do this because we just recently started distributing to Audible, but you do need to send me the ISBN, runtime, pub date, and whether or not there are any supplemental materials for each title. So that's why it's good that if you know the runtime and you're adding that to your metadata, because then you don't have to like think about it afterwards. And then I need to email that information to them. Okay. That's all manually. I have no idea why, since it's Audible. It's kind of wild, but that's just part of it. That they don't seem to have anything that crawls the system automatically the same way it does with EPUBs, and we have to alert them of any changes and when we send new things. But luckily I do seem to only be dealing with two actual humans there that are on our account, Steve and Phil, and Steve and Phil are great so far. So we just need to make sure we don't skip this step. So supplemental materials, a little note on that. If your title, so I've had some people that have created audiobooks out of picture books, which is great, and that's fine. But if illustrations are mentioned in the description, as if it hasn't really been changed from the visual, they will potentially reject it, because it looks like there should be supplemental material with it. So if you have an audio version of something heavily illustrated, I just recommend taking the word illustration out of the description and just describe the audio instead. So you might have to change your main book description a little bit there. Okay. And so the same goes for updating, just for Audible. Okay, so updates are manual for every other vendor, but updates, any content or metadata updates or cover updates for Audible, we need to let them know. Okay, and I'm just going to go back here for a sec. I just want to show you this checklist that I made. So I'm going to send everyone this. Let me know in the chat if you need it in a version other than Google Docs, like if you want it as a PDF or Word document. But Google, I'm such a Google Doc lover. And they just seem to be getting better. So I made this as an actual checklist. And if you use Google Docs, you can actually assign the task. So I've put in here for you. So like the cover stuff, that should be your graphic designer's problem. That shouldn't be your problem. Okay, so you could actually assign this to your graphic designer, which would be nice, and put a date on it and then check it off when it's done. Okay. I'm saying here, ask your designer to send you INDD files for all your covers. I've noticed that a lot of publishers don't do this. They just get the final file and they're like, great. But if you ask for the INDD file and there's ever an issue with your EPUB or your audiobook cover, I was able to request that eBOUND has access to InDesign now. And so I can actually, and a lot of us have InDesign skills from school, so I can actually fix that for you if your designer is not available. So the .indd file is really, really good to have, because that just means that you have a file that's actually separating out the elements on your, in that file. Some covers, for example, I'll just show you quickly a little example here. Some covers can be fixed fairly easily as far as resizing. So are people familiar with Canva? Is that kind of a thing that's used? I guess it depends on what your role is. So I've got a Canva account for eBOUND here, and I could really easily create a cover if need be. So I've just got one example that I had here of a cover that was the EPUB cover. So again, the rectangular cover as opposed to the square cover. And if I just make a 24 by 24, like the correct size here, and then I've got the EPUB cover here. Certain covers, okay, so we're a little bit short, obviously. Oops. So I would send that to the publisher and I would say, does that look too stretched out to you? Is it legible? Does that look okay? And I would download that as, again, so audiobook, whoops, that's not it. So I would download that from Canva. And again, I'm just showing you this because it's free. It does need to be a JPEG though. And the size, and I mean, sure, we want 100% quality. And then I would just download that as the audiobook ISBN _FC audio.jpg. And I would send that. So audiobook ISBN _FC audio. And it's a JPEG, so I don't have to type that in. And I'm just going to save that. And I would send it to the publisher and say, does this look okay to you? Often with these simpler ones, it looks fine. To me, that looks okay. And I know that that wouldn't be rejected. Files do get rejected if they're really blurry or they look really stretched out, but this is totally acceptable. So if you don't have time or the money or to get the covers resized from your designer, then you can just do it yourself, okay, in Canva. Or again, we have InDesign if you have access to the InDesign files. Okay, so again, this info all about covers, this should be going to your graphic designer so they know to do this when they are making your ebook cover. Really, it's just like a couple clicks for them. So hopefully they wouldn't be charging you an arm and a leg to do an ebook or an audio cover at the same time. So again, here's all the checks to make sure everything is there. And one last thing to note too, it really should be an audio version of the ebook cover. It shouldn't be totally different because lots of different vendors, they will show you the ebook cover and then they'll show you the audiobook cover in the same. Okay. And so for MP3 files, these should go to your audio engineer. So even if you're doing something through CNIB or you got a grant and they're saying, you know, we're doing these accessible books, okay, that's wonderful, but there should be they should be adhering to whatever you need as the person they're making the books for them to go out to all of the vendors. Okay, so this is a list that you can send to your audio engineer or whoever is responsible for that. Okay, a note here that I don't think I went over super clearly. No file is longer than 72 minutes. So this is an overdrive rule. Amazon's or Audible's is 96 minutes, but because 72 is the shorter one, that's the one we have to go with. If a file is longer than 72 minutes, it just means you have to split that chapter up into parts, and you would record that in the chapter metadata as well. Double check that there's no silences or delays. Usually they come at the beginning or end of a file, so just double check your files there. And then make sure that everything that exists in the audio has its own file. So if there are acknowledgements read out, make sure there's a file for acknowledgements, okay? Because you can't skip anything or they'll reject it. And then the metadata. So this list is for the person that creates your metadata. I think we went over everything there pretty closely. And distribution updates, as we said, so send this to myself with, again, we've got all this listed here, the runtime, pub date, supplemental materials. Wait for any distribution errors. You definitely want to check in CoreSource, again, and just in case anyone needs a refresher, that's under manage distribution job queue. Okay, and so here's an example, completed with errors. Okay, what went wrong? I'm clicking on the job and I'm going into asset events and I'm going to look. Okay, so this tried to send this, as I mentioned there before, this is, it didn't have the audio cover. So it was trying to send the EPUB cover. And we've also got some issues with the price. So I would have to go in and check under the channel. This was Zeprelution, I believe, what the pricing issue was. So that's a way to troubleshoot that. Okay. And so in the absence of any distribution errors, the 2 weeks would be what Audible says it'll take for it to process on their site. Okay. If there are issues, I'll get them back long before that. It usually takes a few days. Okay. And then if you need anything updated, like you have a spelling wrong or a bio or a price or something like that, you would change it in your metadata and send it, and then let me know so I can manually tell them. And that's just for Audible. Okay. So everything else is still automated. Alternatively, if all of this sounds like too much, you can also just hire eBOUND to do all of this for you. You would still need to communicate with your audiobook engineer and your graphic designer, but we can take over at the metadata stage, which would include renaming your files and creating the metadata, uploading it, troubleshooting, distributing, and making sure they arrive on site. So we've always offered those services. We would much rather that we teach you and do things like this because that's vital. And that's what eBOUND's all about. But again, if you don't have time for that, then this is a form that I created that hopefully makes kind of putting the info that we would need to create the metadata more simple. So that's in this checklist that I'm going to send you here. And you would fill out this form for each title. Okay. And so I have approval as well today. If you have audiobooks that are new audiobooks that are coming in for this season, if you have it normally takes about 3 hours because of how much messing around there is. But if you have audiobooks that you'd like to have us upload for you, then we're happy to do that and only charge for 2 hours if you're doing like 1 or 2 books. And if you're doing 5 or more, then we can charge for just 1 hour. Okay, so that includes everything. Okay, so that's everything. Did anyone have a question at this time? I'm just gonna see if I can read through the chat here quickly. So if your narrator is your, you do need to add them twice. Yeah, with a full bio, yeah. For contributor roles for readers. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like narrator is the one that processes, and that's what Audible, unfortunately, we're kind of adhering to Audible a lot. So we FTP to Audible directly and also have to do this step. Okay. What's the recommended pause at the beginning and end of a file? That's a good question. I don't think there would be. Usually they flag it if there's more than, it seems like more than 5 seconds, but I think that would still be a lot. I'm just going to see if it says anything under here. So I am going to send everyone this as well. So on page 2, audio signal. Okay, no, it doesn't say it there. I don't remember ever reading anything about the length of the pause, but I wouldn't go for more than a second or 2. Yeah, it doesn't say anything specific about the length of the pause here. Okay. Are there any other questions? So again, I'm going to send out the checklist that has all the links in there. And does anyone need it in not a Google Doc, like a PDF or a Word document, if someone doesn't know how to Google Doc? Let me know in the chat if you do. But yeah, that's it. That's all I have. I hope that helps. In a way, it's good that things sort of went the way they did with Findaway, because now I have so much more information from Audible, and we're able to really dig down and start fixing and helping publishers more. So we're really glad to have finally negotiated that contract, and that goes entirely to Paula for being able to do that. So that was really great. But yeah, that's it. So if no one has any other questions, I will stop sharing here. And I, as I said, will upload this to the eBOUND website. I'll probably call it Audiobook Webinar with the date if you ever need to search for it. And I will send out a follow-up email with all of the files and everything that we talked about today. So thanks very much for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.